Welcome into episode 178 of The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. I'm Ken Ray.
And I'm Nicholas Ptacek.
Well, that's different. Everything's different, actually, right now. And I don't need to tell you why. Lots of people are working from home. Lots of us have lots of new stuff to consider. And to be honest, some stuff that we should have been thinking about all along that we're going to remind you about. Yay! It's an interesting edition of The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. So it's, you don't like to use the terms like, it's a time of crisis, but it is. Right now, here in the States and most parts of the world at this point, I think it's fair to say it's a time of crisis. Lots of people and lots of companies are giving away lots of stuff for free. For example, here in the States, there is one major cable provider that's making its Wi-Fi free for everybody. And that's really cool because a lot of people may not have reliable Wi-Fi at home. So while this can keep them connected, this is also just a trove of information that cable providers, streaming services, and other companies that are giving away their stuff for free can collect. Now, I'm not saying they're all doing it because they're bad guys. I'm not saying they're trying to gather all this information on people. They may be doing it strictly out of the goodness of their heart as a public service thing that they're doing. All of that's fantastic. But all the information that they're gathering does not evaporate when this is all over. It's the kind of stuff that we have talked about, honestly, all along. But as we move into, thinking about this kind of thing more, what are some of the tips, would you say, sir, that people need to think about?
Well, in general, I'd say it's going to be weighing it's going to be a balance that has to be weighed out for everybody on an individual level. For some people who don't have access to easily available Wi-Fi in their home and they're suddenly faced with a situation like this, you're probably going to have to go ahead and take the free Wi-Fi or whatever it is. But just being aware what you potentially are giving away in return for that free service. I think, yes, I would consider this to be kind of an extraordinary times, extraordinary measures type thing. So it's just important not to forget about the privacy stuff in the midst of everything else. So I think that protecting your privacy is obviously stuff that we've talked about on the show here before. We have a lot of options available. Definitely things like, don't reuse the same password you've used for other services when signing up for that new one. Use a password manager. Use sign in with Apple. Anything that's going to help keep your email secure or your password secure. Anything any steps you can take to minimize the amount of information that you're going to be giving away is going to be important.
I would check me on this one if you would, because I am not somebody who uses a VPN on their phone, but I am also not somebody who uses Wi-Fi outside of my home on my phone. I'm fine with the Wi-Fi service, the cellular service that I get from my provider is good. My cap is high enough, buying extra is low enough that I personally have never put a Wi-Fi on my phone. I know there are good ones that are available, but for me, I've just gone with cellular, and I'm only on Wi-Fi when I'm at my house. If you're going to use one of these free Wi-Fi services that are being offered currently, is a VPN a must as far as you're concerned? And then is a free VPN okay? Or do you need to do a bit of research before you decide which one's right for you?
That's a really good question. I would say it depends. I would not go for a free VPN. Essentially, when you're using a VPN, you are saying, I don't trust my internet service provider to have this information, so I'm going to give it to a different third party. So you're essentially moving that trust from your ISP to whatever VPN company you're going for. Mm-hmm. In recent months, we've seen a lot of news about kind of fly-by-night VPNs or ones that have been selling your information on the other end, stuff like that. So I definitely would go for a reputable one. I know in previous episodes we have provided information on companies that we recommend. At this time, the only recommendation that I would personally give would be the Guardian Firewall and VPN, which is available on the App Store for iOS. That is a really, really excellent VPN. The company behind it is way into security and privacy. I have no problems recommending them whatsoever. I've used them myself in the past. I don't generally use a VPN when I'm at home, just because I trust my, you have to trust somebody at some point. I trust my ISP as much as I can.
Right.
But if I was in a situation where it was signing up for free Wi-Fi from a third-party company, but it was, a big enough company, I guess, if we're talking about a major provider, I would say it's okay not to use a VPN in that case. If the Wi-Fi provider is, some company you've never heard of, some guy down the street who's running neighborhood Wi-Fi for everyone, yeah, you might want to change your mind. But for the time being, I would say it's okay to trust your own ISP. Obviously, if you're working from home and your company is instructing you to use a VPN to connect to the corporate networks, which a lot of them are, that is definitely something you need to take into account. And usually those will be provided by the company itself. But it's just something to keep in mind when surfing the web.
I'm thinking too about, so when somebody is signing up for, because I'm assuming it's a sign up thing. I don't know. And I don't want to name the cable company that I'm thinking of in particular, because I don't want anybody to stay away from it because they heard us say their name and they're thinking, oh, well, we can't trust that because, I was listening to this show and they mentioned their name. So I don't want to say anybody's name because I'm not calling anybody out. I'm neither praising nor burying any particular company. I'm just saying, I'm assuming that when this happens, it's not just it's open Wi-Fi and I can get on. I'm assuming that I'm going to have to set up some sort of, if not like a full account, at least some sort of login or something. What I found myself wondering is, should I set up a burner email, or I can't remember what your advice has been in the past on sort of a dummy account for all those things that require an email, but you don't ever want to hear from them.
I mean, I would use sign in with Apple if possible. Yeah. But at the same time, if you're going to be signing up with this company, they're going to be seeing where you're going on the web to whatever extent anyway, because they'd be acting as an ISP for you. But I mean, I think that's down to a personal choice. Yes, I guess if you can, you might want to do something using a burner email, but just being aware that that's not going to be necessarily a super high security step to stop that company from knowing what you're doing online or anything like that.
Honestly, half of it I'm thinking about is just avoiding the spam.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. One other thing that you had mentioned before regarding data caps, I just want to touch on. I do know that a lot of ISPs have been lifting data caps, at least in some of the more majorly affected cities here in the United States. Mm-hmm. So that's something to definitely check in with to see if your provider is removing caps for the duration of this, shelter in place type stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's a really awesome move.
Same thing too. Forgive me, with the cellular providers. I mean, yeah. I do know that there are people in my life who are like, they'll hop on any free Wi-Fi they can find because their data cap is so low on their cellular service. Exactly. Check with your cell company, because right now they may be in a place of saying, yeah, don't worry about it. I mean, I'm really curious what's going to happen when, 6 months down the road, a year down the road, however long down the road, all the ISPs are like, yeah, so we're going to need to put those caps back on now. But hopefully that's a conversation we get to have 6 months or a year down the road.
Yep.
Blending. I think we're blending a lot of the topics that we're doing today. It's not off the cuff exactly, but it's not. It is what it is. It's today. So we got more security stuff, but this is not your out and about. This is not your signing up for a new service. This is you're working from home. Congratulations, you're living the dream. Except I don't think this is how anybody wanted to get to that dream. I mean, I personally, and you and I will talk about this in a bit, I've been working from home for 12 years now, I think. Well, part-time, because macOS Ken started 14 years ago, and that's always been a thing that I did either at home or at a coffee shop. But I've been working solely from home for the past 12 years. Kind of found myself excited for some people who've never done it before because, you know, they get to do something new. Whereas you and I are like, oh, yeah, welcome home. It's, yeah, coffee's over there and nobody's paying for it but me. I will say, so we want to hit like some of the security stuff here because a lot of people are working from home for the first time. Now, we're talking specifically about people who went to work Friday and everything was fine. And then Monday they didn't go in anymore. And their boss came to them and said, and not came to them, obviously, because he's staying at least 6 feet away, probably further, came to them and said, listen, you've got a computer. I'm going to need you to log in and start doing stuff. You've got a tablet. I'm going to need you to start logging in and doing stuff. This is not your work gave you a computer and a tablet. If your organization has an IT department and they've issued you a laptop and a phone, you should be good. And we're probably going to talk a little bit more about this in the coming weeks. But right now, for this exercise, we're assuming you've got your laptop that you went out and bought with your own money. And now your boss has said, I'm going to need you to XYZ. This is not going to be an all-inclusive list. What I've asked Mr. Ptacek to do is actually just come up with like 3 tips for the suddenly working at home. This is like triage. This is like a MASH unit. This is... You got to do something down and dirty to make sure that you're safe while you're doing this stuff with this equipment that was never meant to do this stuff. Home Wi-Fi, home computer, all that. What would be some of your suggestions, sir?
The very first one would be make sure your system is up to date with the latest security patches. Nothing new. We've been saying it for years, but it's really important. You're going to be using your computer as your main connection to your workplace when working from home. So it's really important that your computer stays in tip-top shape. And the first step for that is making sure that you've got it all patched up with the latest security patches, update your apps, do whatever you can to make sure that side of the security stuff is covered. If you have AV software, if you have antivirus software, we'd recommend running a scan with that. It's just the general basic normal security precautions we've recommended for years. Another one, making backups. This one, I think, is going to be even more important when you're talking about somebody who's working from home with, especially if they have pets or small children or, I guess, weird roommates. Somebody, you don't want to be in a situation where you've been working on this PowerPoint presentation or whatever you're going to be delivering virtually to your company in 2 hours and you find out that your kid decided to delete it or basically wrecked it or something like that. So make sure you're doing backups. It's already something that we've talked about before using Time Machine or any of the other built-in backup systems. But this would be a good time to make sure that those are up and running. Double check, make sure you've got it enabled, make sure you've got backup copies going for your important information.
Let me ask you another question really quickly, because this is a fairly easy thing to do in Mac OS. I know you and Mr. Raba have always said you need to run 2 accounts on your computer. One would be your admin account, and great, so there's your admin account. Now go ahead and make a separate place for you to actually do your work on. You don't want all of that happening in the admin. Do you want a separate login for the work that you're going to be doing?
That's actually a really good question. That's not a bad idea at all. There are a couple things to keep in mind. That a separate account is still not going to save you if you've left your computer unlocked and you get up to go to the bathroom and your child or your dog or your cat or whatever comes in and mashes the keyboard. Yeah. And I think that we, as much as we push that it's important to have your computer password protected if you leave your desk in an office environment, I know at home most people don't bother doing that. So that's something to keep in mind. Yeah, it's totally true.
I seriously work until 3 a.m. regularly, and still, when I get up and go to use the restroom, when I'm the only person awake in the house, and there's no pet around, there's no person around, there's nobody, I still close my lid.
That is okay. Well, then you are probably one of a few. I do the same thing. I've got my Apple Watch, so the whole password unlocking thing is really
almost
it's
frictionless,
streamlined. Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's just something to keep in mind because you've got to make sure you've got security in mind from avenues you wouldn't normally think of. You wouldn't think of your kids or your pet as a security threat potentially, but you might have to kind of get into that mindset when working from home for the first time or first time in a long time. And another thing to keep in mind would be that a lot of this whole work from home thing is requiring specialized software. Mm-hmm. Most places are using Skype or Zoom. Some of the software that is used for those online meetings and connecting with other people online has had issues in the past, security issues.
Right.
So the one thing I will say is that maybe if you want to write it down or something like that, just figure out what apps your company is going to have you install or that you're going to need to install in order to be working from home. And remember to just disable them, uninstall them, whatever, once things get back to normal, whenever that may be. I would just say that's you don't necessarily want to forget that you're running some ancient piece of chat software that's been running in the background of your system that you totally forgot about. And 2 years down the line, there's a security vulnerability. And since you haven't opened it in 2 years, it wasn't patched. That's not a situation you want to be in. So just keep in mind that you're going to have to install some software to make this whole thing work, but you probably don't necessarily want to keep it installed after all is said and done. That's not super important, but it's something to at least keep in mind.
And then there's one other thing, and this, again, so much of this stuff, it's weird. I mean, it feels like, obviously, we weren't thinking anything like this. Nobody wants to think anything like this, but a lot of what we've talked about has been training for stuff like this. Talk to me about network security as well, because it's the kind of thing that, honestly, most people don't think about. The cable guy comes, he installs your router, he leaves. Do we need to change our passwords? How often do we need to change our passwords? What do we need to make sure that we know not only about, okay, so my machine is now locked down because I did that, but have I ever even paid attention to the security of my network?
And that's a really good question. Most providers these days, internet providers, if you have a modem from them, it's usually coming with Wi-Fi built in. And these days, most of those do have secure connections. They've got various security protocols. If you look, and there's a really easy way to tell if you're good or not there, which is if you open up your airport menu on your Mac or on your iOS device, you should see a little lock next to the network name if it's a secure network. And that's something you're going to want to double check on. If your Wi-Fi router isn't running with a password for some reason, which is really not good anyway, you're going to want to go ahead and look up the information for the manufacturer, figure out how to set up a password for that, provide the password for all of your various devices. If you don't have a password turned on for your Wi-Fi and you turn it on, you're also going to have to make sure that your TV or your security cameras or whatever other devices you happen to have on your home network, you're going to need to log in with all of those. But almost all modems and routers these days that are coming from a commercial internet service provider are going to come with security enabled by default. It's just been a transition that's been happening over the past few years. Obviously, we wanted it happening more quickly than it did, but these days, for the most part, I would say that most of our listeners are probably good, but it doesn't hurt to double check.
Well, from the security part to the, I don't want to say sanity, because, who am I? But I've worked from home for a very long time. Home has changed a lot for me over the past several years. I'd say, golly, macOS 10 has probably come from 5 different locations, sometimes in the same city, sometimes different. But, I mean, doing the whole work from home thing is something that I've been doing for a while. I didn't have a clear idea of how to do it, and there are some things that I've sort of stumbled across that have made it easier for me personally. I have a feeling a gentleman as methodical as Mr. Ptacek, who has also worked remotely for quite some time, may have some tips, some pointers, some ideas that he would like to share with people, because I know a lot of people are freaking out, not going to work. I mean, they're still working, but they're not going to work. What are some of the things that you have found have worked for you?
Yeah, there are definitely some good tips that I've learned just through experience when working remotely or working from home, which I've been doing for over a decade now. So yeah, it definitely takes some getting used to. And I'd say the first thing that everybody should keep in mind when working from home for the first time or the first time in a long time, it's going to be a little bumpy at first. So don't sweat it if you don't get it right. There are going to be days that you feel like you didn't get anything accomplished. There are going to be days where the interruptions are coming every 5 minutes, and just everybody's dealing with that right now. So don't worry about it. But there are things you can do that will make things a little bit easier. So here would be my tips. If at all possible, set aside a separate room to work from, a separate work area, something with a door if possible. A door that locks is even better. Close that door. You try and kind of cordon yourself off from everybody else who's at home. This is really important, especially if you have small children at home. If you have pets at home, I think that's kind of up to people on an individual level if they want the pet in the room with them, or because I know from having had a cat in the past that if I closed the door and the cat wanted in, it would just annoy me till I let it in. So, this would be more for if you have small children, which I do. Other options, if you can't find a separate room or if you can still hear the kids from 2 floors away, noise canceling headphones can really help, or putting on some music or anything that can kind of get you into this little work bubble. But understanding that you will get interrupted and trying not to get too mad when those interruptions happen is really important. I would suggest getting up and walking around every once in a while. When you're working from home, there have been more than a few occasions where I've forgotten to eat a meal because I'm at my desk, I'm really into whatever I'm working on, and all of a sudden it's 2 hours past lunchtime and I'm going to ruin my dinner if I eat a snack at that point. So get up, take a walk around the room you've set aside as your office, or get a glass of water. Just give your eyes and your body a break, because when you're working in an office compared to working at home, you've got a bunch of I wouldn't necessarily say interruptions even, but just in instances where you're not sitting there staring at your computer screen. Right. You get up to get a cup of coffee. You have to go to the bathroom. You get up to go to that work meeting, face-to-face meeting. Any of those things are kind of giving your body a bit of a break from just sitting in a chair, and that's not necessarily going to be the same when you're working from home. So that's really important, is just to remember to get up and take a break.
We've talked before, actually, about there is some software out there that employers will put on a computer to monitor your productivity. I really hope you're not working for one of those, because in the office, in the office, you don't work 8 hours. You might be there for 8 hours, and you might actually be doing something for those 8 hours, but when you get up to go to the bathroom, that's not working. When you stop and talk to somebody at the coffee maker, that's not working. But unless you're spending an hour there, nobody's finding you for that. They're not looking over your shoulder, making sure the time it takes to get to the meeting, the time that you have to wait for the person who's running the meeting because they got stuck in their last meeting, and then getting back to your desk, that's all time that is important, but you're not on the clock for every single second of those 8 hours, which is not to say that you should just goof off when you're at home. But honestly, the people that I know who actually work for a corporation, but from their homes, put in harder days than anybody I ever saw in any of the offices that I ever worked in, because they don't have those, I bumped into so-and-so at the coffee maker, or I had to wait 20 minutes while they did this thing. The other thing, too, and forgive me, I'm not your boss. I'm not your HR guy. I don't know anybody whose productivity is 100% this week. Stuff is just, it's too weird. So my personal thing is, you're going to find your habit. You're going to find your place that you can work. I personally have 3 different places in my home where I can sit and work comfortably. And when I'm sitting there, I'm working comfortably. But if that space needs to be turned over to something else, I've got 2 other places I can go. It's totally cool. There is certain music that I listen to. The television, for me personally, is my enemy. For other people, they need to have noise on in the background that is like a TV or a movie or something like that. You're going to find your groove. You're not going to find it tomorrow, but you're going to start to. And I don't know. I didn't mean to interrupt you, sir, but I think the thing that I most want people to do is not be hard on themselves, at least for a couple of weeks, maybe more, because, yeah, you're working from home. And I joked earlier that you're living the dream. Most of the people who are working from home now, all of a sudden, this is not how they dreamed of getting there.
And you're 100% spot on there. I would say that if there is any company out there that's thinking about installing productivity tracking, time tracking software on their employees' computers while they work from home during this current situation, that's not cool. I would hope that doesn't happen. I'm sure it will, because just knowing people in companies,
yeah.
But that, any company that does that right now, that's really not cool. And I think most people would agree with that. But exactly what you said, Ken, don't be too hard on yourself if you can't put in 8 hours of work, and especially don't even try and put 8 straight hours in with work if you've got other people living in your house with you, because it won't happen. For me personally, I've had times in the past when it's been easier for me to work a few hours in the morning and then work again later at night and spend more daytime hours with my family. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that. If obviously you're depending on your company, you might have to pass that, run that by your boss and make sure it's okay. But and if on the flip side of the coin, if you can be really productive and get your work done in 4 or 5 hours, there's nothing wrong with that either. What you said, Ken, is spot on. You're not, having those coffee breaks. You're not talking to coworkers. You're not just having a bunch of those little distractions in that sense that we're taking away from a typical 8-hour workday at the office. So yeah, it's going to be really important not to be too hard on yourself. And again, when you do inevitably get interrupted, and it will always be at the worst possible time, try not to get too upset, because it's I guarantee it's going to happen. And if you're not used to it, it's going to be really annoying at first. Actually, I don't know that it gets any less annoying, but just be aware that it's going to happen. So better to know that ahead of time. There are a couple other things I would say. One thing to be aware of, obviously, is that especially if we're going to be doing video conferencing now for work stuff, just be aware that you've got a camera on your computer. You might want to tidy up whatever's behind the camera in your workspace, or, let everybody see the clutter that's your temporary office. I don't think people are going to care all that much, but just being aware that the cameras and microphones are going to be picking up stuff in your room, around your house, whatever, that you may just want to double check first. You keep things as professional as you can in terms of where you're working from. And then I would also say, and this one, I think we're not going to really know how important this will be right away, but from my point of view, I'm picturing, okay, everybody's going to start working from home, and it's going to ramp up here over the next couple of weeks. And there's going to be a lot of people online doing a lot of video conferencing, thus why a lot of the ISPs are removing data caps. So depending on where you are, your internet might be a little more sluggish than normal. I would suggest going ahead and, especially, again, if you have kids or other family members who need some distraction while you're working, go ahead and download some movies or music or whatever to your local network, to your TV or your Xbox or computer or whatever. And just that's going to be one less thing that's going to be competing with your video stream if you have to do a work conference. If you're running a lot of intensive bandwidth intensive applications, be it streaming movies or streaming video for work at the same time across multiple devices, depending on how fast your network speed is, you might start lagging out, getting your video doesn't sync up with your audio, all those kind of typical problems. So a good way to avoid that is make sure you have some backup entertainment already downloaded for the other people who are stuck in the house while you're working from home.
So we've acknowledged a number of times this is kind of an odd show. Normally there would actually only be 3 segments, and there are 4. Normally going into the last segment, I would do the ad for MacScan 3 by Secure Mac, and I'm not going to do the normal ad. I am, however, going to embarrass Mr. Ptacek. The way I got to know these guys was back in 2008, 2007, maybe. there was a bit of malware written for the Mac. And the thing is, Mac malware in the wild was so rare at the time that it was news. So I talked about it on Mac OS Ken. And then there was this company called Secure Mac that had a tool that could find the malware and would actually remove the malware from your computer. And I read a story about it, and what was amazing to me was they were giving it away for free. Now, they could have capitalized on the fear. They could have charged somebody, a lot of money to take this one bit of malware off. And what they did instead was put it out there and gave it away. And unlike the thing that we were talking about earlier, where, what's going to happen with this information down the road, that was a freebie. That was just check your computer to see if you have this. If you do, we'll get it off there for you. And thus was a friendship formed. I was amazed, actually, that they didn't really try to capitalize. And so I will also tell you that I use MacScan 3 by Secure Mac. I have for years. It runs every night for me at 10 o'clock local time, goes through, takes off all the adware that MarketWatch puts on there every single time I go, and then searches my computer for other stuff too. So there is a 30-day free trial if you want to find it. I can't even remember the URL. MacScan 3 by Secure Mac. Your 30-day free trial is waiting at securemac.com/MacScan. securemac.com/MacScan. And there. I hope you weren't too embarrassed.
No, that was really nice, Ken. Thank you.
Oh, sure. It's true. So the reason I wanted to talk to you specifically today, and I don't want to be maudlin, whatever. I hate this time, as unfun as the rest of this show has been. This is probably the least fun segment of the whole thing. Certainly the one that I've dreaded the most. And I'm going to say it as delicately as possible. We want to make sure that your information is accessible even if you're incapacitated. Now, this is actually an important thing for all of us to do all of the time. And I can assure you, I have not. I can assure you that I'm thinking about it more today. We all know that, man is mortal, but that's other people, Nick. That's not you and me. We're going to live forever. Even during a regular flu season, though, let's say you get sick for 7 days. A lot can happen in 7 days, and you're going to get better. And honestly, a lot of people getting sick right now, most people are going to get better if they even get sick. And most of us aren't even going to get sick if all this goes the way it's supposed to go, right? Even that, though, just a regular illness, bills have to be paid. People need to be contacted. Things have to happen. And it's fantastic if you've got all of your stuff locked up safe. Yay! But life keeps going. And if it gets bumpy, somebody else is going to need to get in. And if they can't, boo. So I hit you up earlier with this topic, and I'm curious, earlier this week, what tips do you have? Because it's, who do you trust? How do you go about sharing? How do you go about making sure that stuff isn't shared until it's actually time for stuff to be shared? What are your thoughts?
The very first thing would be making sure that somebody has access to your account information. And there are a couple different ways to go about that. Obviously, if you're living with other people that you trust, that you'd want to have your account information, family, close friends, whatever it may be, you're going to need to have a place in the house where I think the easiest way to do it right now is to print it out. Your account numbers, especially for things that are the really important bills, list the website if possible. And then you're going to have login info. The safest way to do that would still be to use a password manager. I know that 1Password allows different vaults to be created. So you could have your main vault that is all of your account information. And then you could mark certain accounts as things to go into a shared vault that you could share with family members. So there'd be 1Password. Let me clarify. The app 1Password, then you would have a single password that you'd have to enter for that shared vault. And then whoever you gave that password to could then get access to whatever other account information you stored within that vault. So your cell phone account information, your internet account information, your health insurance account information, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Obviously, some things aren't going to be as important right now. Some things will be very important. So you're going to have to go through and figure that out. But you definitely want to make sure that somebody has access to that account information if they need to access it for any reason. And I would say that another step would be device passcodes or passwords. That's probably the number one thing that you're going to need to make sure that somebody else has access to, just because so many devices these days are set up to wipe information if you enter the wrong password too many times, which is a great security step most of the time. But when we want our loved ones to be able to access our information, it's slightly different. Now, there are a couple of other things that you can do that you aren't necessarily handing over the keys to the kingdom immediately. You can set up, I know with Gmail at least, you can set it up so somebody you mark somebody as a trusted contact, and if you haven't logged into your Gmail account for a specific number of days, it will automatically take action. One of the actions is wipe everything. Another action is provide access either in full or in part to that specified person. So that's an option, and that's especially if you have a lot of information in your email or your Google account, that would be important. That's something to keep in mind. I would also say, in terms of information to have on hand for family members, would be making sure you've got their health history information, including what meds they're on, what dosages they're on. That kind of stuff will be important if you would have to be contacting a hospital for a loved one, and you can't ask them, hey, what meds are you on, Grandpa? Just having that information ahead of time and hoping you don't have to use it will be a lot better than scrambling after the fact to try and figure out, because things will be hectic enough as it is. They're already hectic. Yeah. So this is all stuff you can do that will it'll make life way easier should the need arise. So I would say do it now while things are still somewhat less crazy, just in the event that you need it later. But the biggest thing would be making sure that your family members could access your accounts if need be, because obviously, as you said before, we still have bills to pay. It's still necessary to be able to check account information, especially if it comes to something like insurance. And so those are all, I would say this is the time that it's okay to be giving somebody else your password. Like, it's probably the one and only time I'll say it. But in this case, it's not a bad idea for families, at least, or close friends, to be making sure they've got that in mind. And again, you don't have to give them all of your passwords. They don't necessarily need to see your old live journal posts from 20 years ago or whatever it is. But you don't. You're going to be able to. I think people will be able to tell which ones are important, and it's usually going to be things that have bills due, or things that relate directly to somebody's health, or health history insurance, stuff like that. And that would be, I think, one of the more important things that all of us can do right now, and all of us should do. And this will apply to everyone. I mean, this isn't just for Grandpa. I know I used Grandpa as an example a few minutes ago, but this should apply to every person listening to this. This should apply to myself. This should apply to my wife. My kids are too young to have accounts, so it doesn't matter there. But this is anybody who's paying a bill in your household. This should be something that applies to them, because we, from what we know and predictions and everything else, this won't hit everybody, but at the same time, it's always better just to be on the safe side when it comes to something like this. So making sure that your family and loved ones still have access to your information, should anything happen to you or them, is of utmost importance.
And then maybe you guys could decide on a Disney movie to watch or something. That doesn't have to be now I got to go. Right. Which, yes. Unfortunately, you actually said earlier, maybe we should rearrange things so that we don't end on a down note. And I thought, no. And yet here we are. And so I kind of want to sing.
I do have something. I mean,
okay.
When I said before, for me, where I've personally had to break my work day up into a couple different chunks of work time when the kids are asleep. Yes, this is actually a really good time to spend time with the family. I know that in our connected world, we're all on our devices all the time. Many of us do that through dinner, even though we know we shouldn't, that kind of stuff. Just take some of that extra time you have at home and just, watch a movie with your family, or do some art projects, or just something fun, because it's going to probably get kind of boring at home.
Yeah.
In short order for a lot of people. So making sure that you take the time to you have some form of self-care for yourself and your family is going to be really, really important. And that will actually help keep you more productive when you are working from home.
Yeah, just so we're clear, this is not a good time to spend with extended family. I mean,
Yes.
but the people in your house that you barely say hi to as you pass them in the hall, it might be a good time to see what they're up to, or do movie night or something like that. Well, in the family room, obviously. Hey, if you're looking for more security news and how-tos, the place to look is securemac.com/checklist. Oh man, I need to send a fruit basket to the guy who's doing notes for this week's show, don't I? Holy cow. Yeah, okay. There are going to be notes for this show. Probably in the next couple of days would be my guess. Notes for all the shows that we've done before, and you can actually listen to every show right there as well. It all starts at one place, securemac.com/checklist. If you have a question you'd like to ask or a topic you would like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. The address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. And we'll talk to you next week.